So unchecked pride is the root of a lot of our cultural dysfunction. I would argue the majority of our cultural dysfunction. And what happens when no one checks your pride, or when no one checks the pride of somebody else, is that it runs wild, as you've seen with Musk and Trump. And it leads to this kind of interesting thing where we're now getting to the opposite side of pride, and we're going to talk about that later on. But now I want to kind of talk about the dichotomy of the two. So we've talked about pride, but now we're leading to another segment of what pride eventually leads to. And what people happens, they refuse to check their pride, even when they should check their pride, which leads to the quote-unquote unashamed group of people, the people who are unashamed, quote-unquote, of their actions. And this brings me to Glenn Greenwald. So Glenn Greenwald, a couple of weeks ago, around the same time as the Musk-Trump thing blew up, I think it was a little before, a little after, a video was leaked of Glenn Greenwald. For those who don't know, Glenn Greenwald is a massive independent journalist. He has a show on Rumble called System Update. He broke the Snowden reporting primarily. I forget who the woman journalist is. I apologize about that. But Glenn was made famous for that. And Glenn has been a trailblazing independent journalist since then. And basically, I think Glenn is probably the best living journalist today. I'd put Michael Schellenberger up there. I'd put Julian Assange up there. I'd put Matt Taibbi up there. I'd put all those guys up there. But there is a video that was leaked about Glenn Greenwald, and it was pretty disturbing, honestly. Like I knew, and Glenn is gay for people who don't know. So Glenn is a gay man, and he was formerly married to a man, and he's adopted 2 kids. He lives down in Brazil, actually, because he's like an expat from the United States, and he runs his operation down there, and he has a family down there and dogs and his kids now and stuff. So Glenn is a gay man, and he was videotaped with what turned out or looked like strongly to be a prostitute, and he was like saying a bunch of very, very sexual things, and he was like licking this guy's feet, and there's like a meth pipe in the background. It was a wild thing to kind of see. I didn't watch the whole video. I kind of just like saw, because I didn't want to see Glenn get debased in that way. I'm uncomfortable watching that stuff anyway, to be perfectly honest with you. But so this video comes out, and it came out, I think, for a reason, because this was, like all of these kind of leaked scandalous things are, is a malicious attempt to take down a journalist. This is what this is. That is why the video was released then. So it's no, and by the way, in terms of when this was released, it was released, I believe, right between he gave an interview to Tucker Carlson and an interview with Megyn Kelly, when they talked to him about the Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Epstein files stuff. They talked about Gaza. They talked about corruption. They talked about the Middle East. Talked about Israel. Talked about a lot of different things. And so Glenn is not afraid to touch any of those issues. And like I said, he is the best living journalist today, in my view. And great journalists, no matter who they are or what their beliefs are, they always come under fire for saying these types of things, for going against the established order. That's what journalism is supposed to be at the end of the day. It's not supposed to be a PR firm for those in power. It's supposed to check those in power. Same with comedians, which why a lot of comedy sucked for a while. But now it's reverting back to that. And so this is why Glenn got this video released at him, and it was a low blow. It was an awful thing to do in terms of releasing it into the public eye. And it was, shame on those people for doing that in terms of trying to destroy a guy's reputation, not on his record of being a journalist, but on his personal life. And like I said, I have no interest in getting in anybody's bedroom. I have no interest in, telling people what their sexual politics should be, any of that. It really doesn't interest me in terms of the overall stuff. However, that being said, there is something that is concerning about this behavior that we need to address. So this brings me to Matt Walsh. So Matt Walsh went on Tucker's show about a week or 2 weeks before Glenn went on. Glenn's been on a bunch of times, but I think this is the first time that Matt has been on Tucker's platform after he's been on Fox. Matt was on his show on Fox a decent amount, not a terrible amount, but a decent amount. And so Matt Walsh went viral for a couple of things he said inside of Tucker's interview, because Walsh really can't help himself, I don't think, at this point, which is why I love Matt Walsh a lot. And so he went on Tucker's show. The most famous clip that came out of that interview was that Matt Walsh said that he believed that gay couples should not be allowed to adopt kids. That is what Matt Walsh said. And you can clip that. You can go back in Tucker's interview and listen to it. So he had a major, this is a bombshell moment for a lot of people. He's basically said, like, well, look, and Matt Walsh is a Catholic. Matt Walsh has 6 kids. He's very religious. His faith has really guided him throughout his entire life. He's probably the most devoutly religious person of the people in the company he works for, in the Daily Wire. Shapiro's up there, obviously. Michael Knowles is. But anyways, Walsh is a very devout Catholic. And in his view, gay couples, men or women, should not be able to adopt kids. And so, bring it back to Glenn. Glenn is gay. He has 2 children. He was married to a man for a long time. His husband passed away, I believe, last year or 2 years ago. He got sick and died very young. He was a lot younger than Glenn was. And that was very sad. Obviously, it's sad when your spouse dies in any case. And so Glenn clipped that interview. And Glenn and Tucker are really good friends. But he clipped that piece, and he went after Matt Walsh really hard. He called him bigoted. He called him anti-gay. He called him homophobic, which really is kind of rich and hilarious and hypocritical, given Glenn's constant banter against the types of things that he opposes on issues that he champions. I put out a tweet after this saying, every person can play the "I'm not offended" card until they're sacred cows on the altar. And Glenn's obviously inside of this, his sexuality is his one that he wants, the hill that he wants to die on. And so he goes after Walsh really hard on this. And then a couple of weeks later, the video of Glenn gets leaked and released, and then Walsh kind of claps back at him and said, like, well, I told you this is why everything else is. And so this video leaks, and it goes crazy viral, and people are seeing it everywhere. People are talking about it, people on the left, people on the right, people, whatever. And so Greenwald puts out a statement, small thing, not anything huge, and he basically says, like, hey, the video is real. This antics, whatever, this is kind of a personal thing, but it got leaked. I'm trying to find out who leaked it. I believe he said that they found the person, or they were zeroing in on the person, which would be a good thing. But when Glenn issued the statement, the key word that I found very, very interesting was unashamed. He said he was unashamed of what was in that video. And that is what we need to focus on. That is the key issue. That is why pride is a problem, particularly in America. We have no longer allowed any concept of shame, any sense of shame, good or bad, to have a place in our culture. We have done everything to remove shame at all, any consequences of lingering feelings, of any choice that you make. If it's the right issue, you should be, quote unquote, unashamed of it. You shouldn't feel bad about what you did. So essentially, again, I'll preface this. People are free to do what they wish in their personal lives. No government, no corporation, especially no power structure, should be able to infringe on your rights and what goes on in your home, particularly in your bedroom, okay? Like, I do not want the government, there's that hilarious Family Guy episode where the FCC comes in and basically censors everything in terms of, like, the Peter and Lois' sex life and all that kind of stuff. No one can swear anymore, all that sort of thing. And do I have my views on this? Obviously, I'm a Christian. I do not believe in gay marriage. I don't believe in any of those things as a formalized marriage as an institution between a man and woman, etc. We can get into that all day. But I am, in terms of a government issue, you can do whatever you want to do inside your bedroom. I really don't care. I would prefer, obviously, that you not sin and do that, but that's just my theory. But anyway, this is not the case with Glenn Greenwald. And so this video's out there. It is out there. This video will live forever. It will forever be a stain on Glenn Greenwald's legacy. And again, this is saying nothing about his journalistic integrity, because I believe Glenn to be the best living modern journalist in history. I want to make that abundantly clear. I have no problem with Glenn's journalism. His journalism stands alone. But this video is out there. It will affect him. It will affect his children. It will affect his show. It will affect his company. It will affect his standing in terms of how seriously his journalism is perceived. And the reality is, like anybody else who this scenario has faced, Glenn Greenwald should feel shame about this. He should not be unashamed. I have had things about me leaked on the internet, naked pictures leaked on the internet. I've been sextorted before. I've called the police about it multiple times. I did not say I was unashamed. I'm very ashamed about that. I'm very ashamed. And people should be ashamed, because that's wrong. And Glenn Greenwald should feel shame about this. He defaced himself. He defaced his children. And moreover, that's what I want to focus on. He is raising 2 young boys right now as a single dad, essentially. And he's got this random male prostitute who's saying that, he's like licking this guy's feet, and there's a meth pipe in the background. There's drugs. He's degrading himself on camera. He's dressed in a maid's outfit. And it's like, really? Like, you're not ashamed of that? Like, a little bit? You don't worry about how that's going to affect, like, your kids are going to see that one day. You're Glenn Greenwald. You're the biggest living journalist today. Like, you're really not going to feel shame about that? You really don't think that that's going to matter to you, to your boys, to those young kids? Like I have a lot of questions. I'm sorry. So where does this lead? That's the biggest thing. Where does this lead? Are his children safe? Like there's a lot of questions here. And again, I can't be forward about this enough. I respect Glenn Greenwald tremendously. Tremendously. There are not people as brave as Glenn Greenwald in the journalistic establishment today. Glenn should be commended for those things. I believe he is one of the most indispensable people that we have in our culture right now towards guarding the truth, the capital T truth. But the truth that Glenn Greenwald will never fess up to is that there is such a thing as shame. You should feel shame about things. You should try to do better about things in your future, about your life. And that is a truth that Glenn Greenwald will never fess up to, because Jason Whitlock was talking about this. I think this is right too. He is so steeped in his sin problem, as we all are. Glenn Greenwald is a deeply sinful person. I am a deeply sinful person. We all are deeply sinful people. But the difference is, I will admit that. At least I hope I do, God willing. But Glenn Greenwald will never admit that, because he doesn't want to admit that he has pride in this area and that what he's doing is wrong. You cannot solve pride without having a sense of shame about your actions. If you believe truly that your actions have no consequences, you will never have a prayer of solving your sin problems. A sense of shame is absolutely necessary to combating pride. If you don't have shame, you will never fix anything about your prideful actions and all of the bad things that come from them.